and she's going to introduce her. All right. Let's see here. And I'm trying to go paperless, so you'll have to bear with me a little bit. So we have three fantastic speakers who are going to talk about the path to immigration, what they do, some of the things they're confronted with, some of the issues. Paul and I have been talking about kind of what we know as a league, kind of what we believe about immigration, but we really didn't understand all of the processes, and we thought that this might help us all understand exactly, what people are confronted with. So, anyhow, so bear with me here. So our first speaker, well, I'm not exactly sure what order they want to go in. Oh, Angela's going first. Fantastic. Let's see here. Angela holds a bachelor's degree in general studies from Wichita State and a Juris Doctorate from the University of Kansas. She began her career working for the Kansas Legal Services, working with victims of domestic violence, and completing her work in the Wyandotte Leavenworth Legal Services Office, working as the elder law attorney. In 1989, Ms. Ferguson began working in the immigration field, and then began her solo practice in 91 in Kansas City, Kansas. And she's currently with the firm of Austin Ferguson. And they work, let's see, providing legal education in the area of immigration. Is that good enough? Okay. All right, next we've got, hopefully you guys are setting in the order maybe. That's okay. That's okay. Next we have Hilary. Hilary Cohen Singer is with the Jewish Vocational Services, and she joined them in 2010 as the executive director. JVS provides programs that help people, including refugees and individuals with disabilities, achieve self-sufficiency and become fully integrated into the community. Hilary has 20 years experience in nonprofit program development and strategic planning. Prior to joining JVS, Hilary worked at UJA Federation of New York, supporting community building efforts in the Russian Jewish community. She also worked at the American Jewish Committee, developing programs on shared public policy concerns between the Jewish community and other ethnic and religious groups. She has a BA in Political Science from Columbia University and a BA in Modern Jewish Studies from the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. She received her Master of Public Administration from the Wagner School of Public Service at New York University. So, and then last but not least is Tracy, who I must mention received our Making Democracy Work Award this last year. So, Tracy is with the Citizenship Program Manager at Catholic Charities in KCK. She developed and implemented the Citizenship Program for immigrants and refugees 2 years ago and has successfully helped over 300 people obtain U.S. citizenship. The Citizenship Program consists of 6 hours of classroom time each week for 12 weeks and includes numerous field trips. And she's continually exploring ways to improve the program. In 2016, she arranged for our league to present classes for these new citizens on voting. So, anyhow, she has extensive, done extensive work with us and a relationship with us in the past regarding immigration issues too. So feel free to fill in whatever I missed, and we're going to let you guys go ahead and take it away.
Well, you guys, I'm supposed to cover all the paths to citizenship in 20 minutes, so get ready to go on the superhighway, okay? We're going. And we'll take questions at the end of this. We'll try and leave plenty of time for you. But buckle your seatbelts, okay? We're going. This is kind of an old slide, but nothing much has changed. There's about, you guys hear it all the time, maybe 11 million undocumented people in the United States, maybe 13, 15. We have no idea how many undocumented people are in the United States, but we're guessing, about 11 million. But the important one is there are lots of naturalized citizens, people who previously had their green cards, their permanent resident status, and they went through the process. They finish the path to citizenship. And there are over 11 million naturalized citizens in the United States, and those are potential voters, right? And then there's lots of permanent residents, and there's a process, a path for permanent residents to get on to become citizens. Some people it's fast. If you're in the military or you're married to a citizen, it can be 3 years, and if you're a regular green card holder, it's 5 years. But there are lots of requirements, and Tracy's going to cover kind of the process, the citizenship process, at the end of our road. Yeah? Just think of immigration law as the map, right? The map for getting legal, the map for getting through the process through all the different federal agencies that you gotta navigate. And let me tell you, the map is complicated and hard to read, and maybe like a topographical map instead of a road map. I don't know. But imagine being uneducated or non-English speaking and trying to navigate. It's difficult. But there are a limited number. Only about 1 million people each year are able to get legal through the system. And they do it through the lottery. You may have been hearing about the lottery system. The lottery system is one of the things on the cutting block in this administration. It's called the diversity lottery because at some point Congress decided that diversity was important, and so we're going to give some of the countries that don't bring very many people to the United States, give them a chance at winning a lottery system. Most people come through through family relationships, or through employment. They're sponsored. And it's a long process, and it's a long road, and it depends on what kind of vehicle you're driving when you get on that road, on how long it's going to take. The family process, you guys have probably heard, there are long lines. Okay, so it may take you 1 year if you're married to a U.S. citizen and everything just goes perfectly, and it may take you more than 25 years if you're a Filipino sibling, okay? Maybe 100 years. It could take a long time. These family lines are enormous. The employment sponsorship is skills-based, education-based, and it's kind of, you have to have an employer sponsor you to get on the path, to get down to the road, get down the road for permanent residence and citizenship. And then we got the humanitarian category. So the refugees, asylees, people who've been here a long time apply for cancellation of removal, and some people who help law enforcement, who are victims of crimes, and help law enforcement are able to get legal through a trafficking visa or a crime victim visa. So those are kind of the humanitarian categories. There we go. There are roadblocks along the way. Let me tell you, there are lots of roadblocks, but if we were in charge of the immigration system, we'd want some roadblocks for serious criminals. Right? We don't, and for terrorists, and polygamists are on there, and smugglers, and people who lie, and there's also poverty restrictions. So if you're too poor, you may not be able to get your green card. Forget what the Statue of Liberty says, right? So there are lots of roadblocks along the way, and people run into those. They hit detours all the time. In the employment-based process, we're going to go through this real fast, and I'll be happy to talk some more about it at the end if you have questions. But there are about 140,000 visas for the entire nation for the entire year. Not that many for an employer to be able to sponsor. And there's all different kinds of levels. So if you're a grave digger, right, I've gotten cases approved for grave diggers. No one wants to go out and dig graves in the summer or the winter. Right? Even if they got machinery, no one wants to do that. So it's hard to find an American to go do that job. It's not impossible to sponsor someone to get their green card for those kinds of jobs. But the higher level the degree, the faster the road, or the faster your vehicle. So if you just have a bachelor's degree and you're legal in the United States and you and you're legal in the United States. You're here on a visitor visa, probably not a student visa, or an H-1B, some kind of working visa. If you're here temporarily and you have an employer that wants to sponsor you, you can get in line if the employer proves to the Department of Labor that there's a shortage of workers. They sponsor you, the employer files an application with immigration, proves that they can afford you, they're not going to underpay you, and that you qualify. You get in line, and the line may be 2 or 3, 4, or 5 years long. Depends on what country you're from, what the job is, and what your education level is. Okay? So some of the lines right now are really short. And when you get to the end of the line, you're a winner. You get your green card. You've been sponsored, you got a job, and you're good to go. And if you have this wonderful employment-based case, an employer wants to sponsor you. People come in to see me all the time. Employer come in, sit down with Maria. She's the best worker I've ever had. I trust her with my life. I give her the keys to my house. She's great. I would do anything. It doesn't matter what it costs. I want to sponsor Maria for her green card. She's got a great family. Her kids, I've watched them grow up. But she's undocumented in the United States. As an employer, I can sponsor her if I can show that there's a shortage for the kind of job that she's going to do. But she has to leave the United States for 10 years. But she's been here illegally. I don't want to pay all that money to sponsor Maria and then lose her. So she's staying. I'm going to keep working her. Sorry, but you don't get papers. So the employment-based process doesn't work for someone who is here undocumented. So a lot of the folks that are here working jobs and paying taxes can't get fixed by their employer. There's not an entry ramp onto that highway. Okay? In the family-based system, we have about 480,000 visas that can be applied for each year, and it comes with different categories again. So spouses of U.S. citizens or permanent residents, you get married, you may be able to get your green card. Okay? Parents, if you're a citizen, you can sponsor your parent. You can sponsor your brothers and sisters and your children. You can't help the nieces or nephews or the aunt who raised you or the grandma who raised you. That doesn't cut it. It's only for the immediate relatives. And if you've been watching the news, listening to the news, that parent category is on the chopping block. Okay, they're talking about canceling out parents. Who needs their parents here, right? Yeah, it's crazy. Okay, that's one of the things under consideration. So in a typical family case, 2 people fall in love. One of them is foreign-born. Do any of you guys know anyone that's not born in the United States? Yeah, well, we got a few. Okay. So you fall in love to meet someone who's from another country, and it takes about a year to get through the process if that person is legal and everything goes perfectly. If the person is still overseas, you met them while you're on a visit to Europe, you come back and you petition for them and you can get them here legally. It's a process. There's a path for getting that person here legally with their green card. And that person wins a green card, and in 3 years they can apply for citizenship, or maybe 5. They're winners, all right? It's not that easy for all the other categories. Okay? So if you marry a permanent resident, it's going to be slower. Married to a citizen, it's fast. Now, here's the typical family that I see in my office, right? They have this big, beautiful wedding. They come to see you. They want to start the process, but the foreign-born person is here illegally. They enter the United States without papers. And so it's still a process. The U.S. citizen or permanent resident files a petition for the foreign-born person. It gets approved. So I kind of put some typical dates up there. They get married. It'll take about 6 months to get the first step approved. And then they won their first step. Then they get on the highway to go back to their home country. Okay? So it's a process. If they're out of status, they have to leave the United States to go fix and go through the process at the embassy. And our laws currently say that if you've been living here more than a year illegally, have to go out for 10 years. Okay? 10 years separation, that's a hard way to start a marriage. But there are some pardons available. Believe it or not, those pardons are getting harder to get under the current administration. Okay? So, but it's possible. It's possible. You may have to be separated for 10 years, or your spouse and kids may have to move to the home country for a while if you want to keep the family together. So those are on the slow track, right? Walking the Katy Trail to St. Louis instead of taking I-70. All right, so there's your path. You may be on that Katy Trail, you may be walking, you may have a bicycle, a clunker, or a Maserati. Right? And if you are an exceptional, extraordinary human being like Usain Bolt, and you're an Olympic runner, we have special categories for extraordinary human beings. So those people have other ways to get to the United States. So exceptional and extraordinary professors, researchers, and athletes get a fast pass. All right. So our immigration system is like our interstate highway system, right? It's always under construction. It should be under construction, and unfortunately, Congress isn't doing their job. They're not starting that construction for our immigration system that could use a little bit of help. All right. One of the fixes that our administration has done this past week, has anyone noticed the Nation of Immigrant thing? Yeah. Well, we are known as a nation of immigrants. Most of us are immigrants, right? Unless you're native-born and Native Indian, you are probably from an immigrant family. But the administration this past week has taken that out of the mission statement of the Department of Homeland Security. They are no longer the immigration service that recognizes that we are a nation of immigrants. We're changing the narrative. I think it's wrong. I believe we are a nation of immigrants. Okay. This is why I think Congress needs to do its job. I think we have kind of a moral obligation to take care of people who are here, even if they came undocumented. Because lots of times, if you know our immigrant community, they're working, they're contributing, they're raising U.S. citizen children, they're paying taxes. Most of them are not committing crimes because they're afraid of the police. Oops, something's all over here. They're trying to stay out of the way. They're trying to stay under the radar so that they can make a better life. They've come here oftentimes for a better life, for safety, security. They breathe just like we do. They bleed just like we do. They're human beings, and I think that our country has a moral obligation to try to improve our system that we have right now. But common sense, man. Our pocketbooks. Every night we have over 30,000 people detained in the United States. It's written into our law that our immigration service has to detain that many people. There are that many beds for undocumented people in the United States who are in the deportation process. That's $100 a night at least out of our pockets for every single one of those every night. Okay? Our tax dollars are going to detain people. And then it costs a lot more to actually get them through the deportation process, because they may be detained for a while, but we also pay the prosecutors and the judges and the detention officers and on and on and on. It costs a lot of money to deport non-criminal people that are here oftentimes for a better life. I don't really want to pay that. And I don't think that it's possible to deport 11 million people. Because if we do deport an individual who's been living here 15, 20 years and they have kids and a house and a wife that they've left behind, they're probably coming back. So it used to be a joke. When I would do these talks, when I first started my practice years ago, a joke, the officers would take them back to Mexico and the immigrant would beat them back to Kansas City. It's not a joke anymore because the immigration border security is much stronger than it used to be. And if they get caught returning, there are criminal penalties and detention and costs and danger. It's much more dangerous than it used to be. It's just not practical. We should recognize the contributions of the immigrants and figure out a way to kind of fix our system. Yeah, these are just some facts from a United Nations study, just that our workforce is growing older and we need workers to replace, and we need support for our Social Security system. Back when Social Security was created, there were, I don't know, some of you guys probably know the number better than I do, 30 plus workers per person that's going to benefit, draw out from the Social Security. I think it's down to 4 workers per person now, so we need the workers. Yeah, let's go on there. I think I'm running out of time. But this, you know, the things that I see that Congress needs to do are sometimes pretty simple. One, you know, we need a current system that will help our businesses be able to get workers legally, and that those entry ramps onto the highway are just kind of closed down sometimes. And if we could make a better system for employers to be able to sponsor folks, it would be a boon. It would help our communities. If we could provide more family visas and not make people wait in line so long, and that also would help, so they wouldn't be living here undocumented. Many of the people that are in the line, that are here in the United States, are actually in the lines already. So tweaking would help. A little road construction wouldn't be a bad thing. I think recognizing that our diversity is an asset. We don't have a whole lot of Norwegians that want to come. You heard him? One of the things that I see is that the undocumented immigrants that I work with are good people, religious people, oftentimes conservative people, and it's just crazy for them to be shut out from our system here in the United States. They want to participate in government, they want to be included, and they want to provide safe places for their children and families. So, well, let's skip that one. Well, you guys have all heard about Syed, probably in the news. We'll be happy to talk about what path he got on and why it didn't work for him. We also have another young man in jail right now by the name of Crescencio. I'd like to introduce you to Diana Martinez. She's the woman who's helping me today. She's an organizer for Advocates for Immigrant Rights and Reconciliation, AIR. And that was why I threw in that little piece that immigrants breathe the same as we do. We are all human beings because they're yearning to breathe free, as their Statue of Liberty says. But Crescencio is a guy that AIR is helping. And, you know, these two men, their cases are kind of similar. They've reached the end of their rope and they're both detained. They both have family, they both have U.S. citizen children, and they both have lawyers that are fighting for them like crazy. The difference between Syed is he's educated, has a job as a chemist, right? And he's got congressmen behind him, or a couple of congressmen behind him, and they're trying to do a special private bill for him in Congress. That is a Hail Mary, let me tell you. But Crescencio doesn't quite have that. He's just trying to be able to stay in jail a little bit longer so his family can see him here in the United States. He doesn't have a lot of hope on his case. Mexican? Yeah? Okay. Mexican and Bangladeshi, and very similar, both working, both paying taxes, both U.S. citizen children, but both pretty hopeless on their cases. I just recently got back from the southern border. I guess not that recently. It's been a little bit of time. But There's groups down there, No More Deaths, that go out and hike the trail, putting out water and food, clothing for people that are crossing, and trying to find bodies. Okay? And we had piles of crosses. They put out a cross for every person that they find. Most of them had names and ages on them, and this was my pile of, help me say this one, desconocido, right? Desconocido, unknown. The bodies that were too decayed, unidentifiable, and there were lots of them. That's the humanitarian reason why we need to fix this immigration system so that people aren't crossing illegally, so they're not having to cross that desert, pay thousands of dollars to the smugglers to bring them in and die in the desert. And if that doesn't tug at your heart, anyway. Okay, just to try and connect the dots a little bit, and then I'm going to pass it along. Congress is the one that has to start this construction, right? And they need to hear from us. It's just not something that we can do. Locally, when we're seeing problems, some of you may have heard about sanctuary. We're not a sanctuary city, we're not a sanctuary state, but there are people that are going to be needing sanctuary if this deportation stuff keeps increasing, and that's where AIR is coming in. We have a network of churches that are considering becoming sanctuaries if Congress doesn't do their jobs to try to fix this problem. Reducing the backlogs, creating a way for visas to be obtained legally, restoring due process. Due process is kind of, this law school junk. Fairness in our system would be nice. Okay? So Congress has done a lot to take away due process from immigrants. And then one of the other things that has been suggested is some kind of registration system. Just having people come forward and register so that we know who's in the United States and get them that entry onto the highway, get them onto the path for permanent residence and citizenship. We'll take questions at the end, and thank you guys for listening.
Good morning. So today I'm going to talk about one sliver of the kinds of people who are on the path to citizenship, and those are refugees who come on that humanitarian path. So that was one of the slices of that pie that Angela showed. So these are some figures from UNHCR. So the path to citizenship for refugees starts in about 12, 15, maybe 20 different countries around the world. That's where their journey begins. So right now, there are 65.6 million people who have been forcibly displaced from their homes because of war. About 22.5 million, that number is up, maybe 7 million in the last 5 years or so, have actually been classified as refugees by the United Nations High Commission on Refugees. Those people, about 55% of them come from 3 countries. I don't know if you can see that very well. South Sudan, Afghanistan, and Syria. And the top hosting countries of refugees: Ethiopia, Uganda, Iran, Lebanon, Pakistan, Turkey. Some of these are modern, Western, industrialized countries. Some of them less so and have many problems of their own. And so the capacity to provide for these hundreds of thousands and millions of people who are fleeing, crossing borders, ending up in their countries, that capacity is a little bit limited. So
actually is a refugee, right? A refugee is a kind of an immigrant, sort of a subcategory. And in order to be designated as a refugee, you have to meet very specific criteria, and you have to get that stamp of approval from the United Nations. So the definition was created in 1951 in the aftermath of World War II, when there was this phenomenon of people who had been displaced from their countries as a result of war. And in order to qualify as a refugee, you have to have a well-founded fear of persecution for one of 5 reasons: your race, your religion, your nationality, your membership in a social group, or your political opinion. So these are individuals who are being targeted for no other reason than who they are, right? These are not people who are primarily motivated by economics or by natural disaster, right? Those things are also legitimate reasons, right, for wanting to leave the situation where you're in and move somewhere else. But the definition of a refugee is fairly limited. So in order to sort of get that stamp of approval, you have to have crossed a border, right? So you have to have fled your country. You have to register with the United Nations, and then the United Nations has to decide, well, what is going to happen to you? So the first option is to return on your own in safety and dignity. Anybody take a guess how often that happens? Right, these are individuals who are fleeing some of the most protracted conflicts in the world, right? So that is not a reality for most of the people who have to flee their country because the militia comes and burns down their village, and they have to run with their family. Maybe, mom and some kids run this way, dad and some kids run that way, depending on where they are when tragedy strikes. So the second is local integration. So that means a refugee from Burma flees into Thailand, tries to integrate into the Thai economy, and their circumstances are very similar to the ones that Angela described in terms of undocumented individuals in the United States. They have no legal right to work, they have no protection under the law. It's a difficult situation. So true local integration with rights to work and rights for safety is just over 1 million people in the last 10 years. So pretty small margin. The last option is to come to a country like the United States. And there's been a lot of talk about refugees and refugee resettlement in the news in the last year, and we are talking about a tiny, tiny sliver, less than 1% of the world's refugee population ever has the opportunity to resettle anywhere, in any country. So that's less than 1%. So another thing that I think the news has sort of skewed for all of us is an understanding of what refugee resettlement really means, right? I think this came into our consciousness a lot as a result of the Syrian crisis, a lot because there were refugees fleeing into Western Europe, and all of a sudden it became a different kind of problem than it had been previously, when it was really affecting countries like we saw up here, Ethiopia, Uganda, Pakistan, right? So the average time that people spend in refugee camps, for that tiny sliver, that 1% that gets to be resettled, the average time that they spend in the camp is 17 years. Right? So these are people who have fled their country, they have gone to a refugee camp, they have gotten married, they have had children, they have children who have never known life outside of a refugee camp. Right? They have children who are stateless, right? They don't belong anywhere. And the desire for these individuals to be part of a society and to belong somewhere is incredibly strong. The individuals that get referred for resettlement are the most vulnerable of that group, right? So they are individuals with urgent medical needs, women and girls at risk, survivors of torture and violence, and children at risk. So those are, right, the subset of the subset of the subset of individuals who are being welcomed into the United States as part of our refugee program. So UNHCR makes the referral, and then the US government gets involved, and the government screening consists of 8 federal agencies, 6 security databases, 5 background checks, and 3 in-person interviews. It is an incredibly thorough process. And it is incredibly easy to get disqualified. So if in your first interview you tell somebody that you fled with this sister, and because of your trauma and your the effects of your flight and the violence that you may have experienced, you say a different sister's name the next time. That's it. Right? The process stops for you because you had an inconsistency in your story. So the vetting process is incredibly thorough, and it has gotten much, much, much more onerous in the last year. So you'll see some of the impact of that. So in 2016, there were about 85,000 refugees resettled into the United States. JBS in Kansas City, which is one of 3 resettlement agencies, along with Catholic Charities and Overland, we welcomed 588 people in 2016. 2017, things started to change. We had the executive order that came out in January of 2017 restricting refugee resettlement from a number of countries, and then all refugee resettlement, and it went back and forth and back and forth. By the end of the year, we resettled 53,000 in our country, and JBS resettled 430 in Kansas City. This year, we are 5 months into our fiscal year. About 8,400 have been granted entry into the United States, and we have resettled 54 people. So a huge reduction in the number of people who are able to come to the United States and pursue their freedom and their security and the welfare of their families. So once somebody is granted entry into the United States, their path to citizenship, their journey, looks a little bit unique, right? So they are authorized to work immediately upon arrival. So they don't have to wait for anything. They can work as soon as they come to the United States, which is a good thing because there is not a huge safety net for individuals like this. So they have about 3 months of support. And after that, they are expected to be self-sufficient. They are also expected to pay back the U.S. government the cost of their travel loans. So ends up about $1,000 a person to reimburse our government for the cost of their flights over. So in true American fashion, they start out their lives here in debt. But we see tremendous success in people working and thriving, I think in part because these are individuals who have been denied the opportunity to work and support themselves for many, many, many years, right? They're not allowed to work in the societies in which they live. If they live in a refugee camp, there's no opportunity for them. Their life consists of waiting in line for their food rations, waiting in line for water. They have no ability to have any agency in their own lives. And so people come here tremendously excited to work and contribute and to send their kids to school and to have a better life here, like every immigrant that comes into this country. Because this is a humanitarian program, their path to green card is a lot shorter than some others. So after 1 year in the United States, they can apply for their permanent residency. They have to go through another background check in case anything has happened in that 1 year, since they had all of the rest of their screenings. They have to have a medical exam. And the application fee for them is waived because of this humanitarian process. And then after that, like any other legal permanent resident, they can naturalize after 5 years.
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks for having me back. So I'm going to talk about our citizenship education program and a little bit about how we help people through the path to citizenship. I just wanted to show you this. It's probably hard to see in the back, but these are refugees resettled in Kansas City, Kansas, what country they've come from. So the solid white circles are their nationality, the country they originated from. And then the other ones that are in the white circles that are not filled in, that's the countries they fled to. And I think it's kind of interesting to see this because you can see, like for example, Burma, most of our refugees from Burma went through Thailand or Malaysia or Indonesia, whereas like people that came from the Congo, you can see there's 6 different countries people fled to. And those are the countries where they applied from. So they may have been in other countries before they got to that country, but I think it's kind of interesting just to see that about the folks that are coming here to Kansas. So we'll go to the next one. So my program, Citizenship Education Program, is within the Refugee and Immigration Services at Catholic Charities. And the obvious goal of a citizenship education program is to help people become citizens. But there's a lot of things that go into that. A lot of them need to learn English. They may have some degree of English, but often not enough to pass the test. There's a civics test, which I'll get into later. And then the whole test, in case you haven't heard this before, is an oral interview in English. So it's not a multiple choice test or a written. There is a small writing component, a small reading component, but it's not like a test like we think of where we sit down and write a test, right? It's an oral interview in English. Our students are all adults, because you have to be 18 or older to be eligible for citizenship. They've all had their green cards at least 5 years. If they are not married to a U.S. citizen, then it's only 3. Most of our students are low income, and most of them have limited English skills. Often if people come in and they have a higher level of English, we just refer them straight to our immigration attorney because they don't really need our class. Our class is meant more for people who need the literacy assistance as well. And the most common groups we have in our classes, you'll see Chin, Karenni, and Karen are all from Burma, and then Bhutanese refugees that came from Nepal, and then Iraq. And in the last year, I'm sure it's no coincidence with the election, we've had a very large increase in Hispanic students. We went from like 2% of our student population to 25% in 1 quarter, in the first quarter after, like when, it was probably right around November. So, and that trend is continuing. We're seeing a lot more, because our classes, even though we're within the refugee program, our citizenship classes are open to anyone who's eligible for citizenship, and they're free. So, since we started the program in January 2015, this is what the countries that students were coming from. And you can see this large chunk, you probably can't read that because it's very small, but this large chunk is from Burma. And then the next largest is Mexico and Bhutan. And then everything else is, we've had like 1 or 2 students from different countries. So go to the next one. And then just this quarter that we're in right now that we started in January and we're going to wrap up at the end of March. We still have Burma as our largest population class, 40 of our students, 40 of the 80, so half of our students are from Burma. But then the next largest is now Bhutan. So that population, probably because we resettled them about 5 or 6 years ago, so now they're all becoming eligible. And you can see also we still have Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, Venezuela, Iraq. We have 2 students from Ukraine. They're the sweetest little couple. He like escorts her into class every day. They're always like very well dressed. They're like, he comes like he's going to a business meeting. They're very sweet. I think they're also like 80 years old or more. They're the cutest. And then we have one from the DRC and one from Eritrea. So we have 3 levels of classes right now. And so Jody mentioned the structure of our program in my intro, but we've actually changed it since then. We have a level A, which is funded by Kansas Office for Refugees grant for service to older refugees. So most of the students in that class are over 60 years old. Also, in that group, because they tend to have the same literacy needs, we have pre-literate and illiterate students, so people that maybe never learned to read and write in their own language. So you can imagine to go from that to doing an oral interview in English, there's a really big jump. So we start some folks in level A, and then level B is people that test into having a low beginning to high beginning literacy level, and level C is intermediate level. So if they test higher than that, like I said, we usually just refer them straight to the attorney. All of our classes, I should mention, levels B and C are actually funded by a grant from USCIS. We didn't know if that grant was going to happen because it was supposed to come out, I think it started October 1st, and we found out on September 29th that we got the grant. So I found out on September 29th that I had a job on October 1st. So that was fun. It's a 2-year grant, fortunately, so we're locked in for 2 years. All our classes run on a quarterly basis. They're 10-week classes, and each level meets 2 days a week for 2 hours at a time. And then levels B and C also have field trips on Friday, so we have an extra day for them. We were going to do field trips for the level A, but we had so many folks that had mobility issues or health issues that walking them around the Nelson Atkins Museum it was just too much for them and for us. But each level progresses to the next. So this that's okay. We pre-test everybody from the beginning to determine their literacy level, and then they either go into A, B, or C. If they pass A at the end of taking that 10-week class, they can move on to B and then on to C. And then once they pass level C, we make an appointment for them with our attorney that's in our building, and he helps them apply for citizenship. And I just wanted to mention that in case you weren't aware, it's $725 to apply for citizenship. So if you remember, most of our students are low income, so we often will have people come in, a married couple or a mother and her daughter that want to apply at the same time. And often what will happen is they can't afford for both of them to apply at one time. So one will apply, and then they'll wait sometimes a year to save money to apply to the next one. And then after they've applied, we've had people that it's about 3 months from application to interview. That is getting longer. The backlog is getting bigger. So I've had people that have waited over a year from application to interview. That's a pretty extreme case. They're not all that long. While they're waiting for their interview, we do one-on-one interview prep with them. So as many times as they want to come. If they want to come once a week during that 3 months to 6 months, or if they want to come, within reason, we try to accommodate all of that. And we just do interview practice with them. And I'm going to demonstrate what an interview looks like later. So, and then they have their interview. If they pass their interview, great. They go on to an oath ceremony. They take the oath of allegiance, and they become a citizen. But as Angela mentioned, this is not always this beautiful straight line. There's often a lot of people that there's extra documents they want, or like I said, the process just takes longer for some people. And recently, Gloria wanted me to mention that we recently have started seeing these mysterious letters from USCIS that have never come before. So we would submit an application for a refugee to apply for citizenship, and they've all been from Burma, so I don't know what it is, why they're targeting Burma, but they're getting these letters that are asking them to come for an interview before their naturalization interview to prove their refugee status. So now we've had 3 or 4 people in the last week or 2 get these letters, and our attorney still doesn't know, no one really knows yet what they're about because none of these interviews have happened yet, as far as I know. I think our first one is next week, so hopefully we'll find out why this is happening. Because as Hilary mentioned, the background checks are so extensive, we're not sure how they could be questioning their status 5, 6, 7 years later. And I have a feeling that if these cases start getting turned down, we're going to have people that are afraid to even apply for citizenship because they don't want to have their status revoked. So that could create a whole other issue, and we're hoping that doesn't happen. Okay, we'll do the next one. So all levels of our citizenship classes, our civics and literacy are intertwined. We try to teach the literacy through civics and civics through literacy. We try to combine it all. And we always focus on speaking, listening, reading, and writing, all 4 macro skills. And then we also integrate into that, we try to do it every class, practice with small talk and questions from the application that would be on their interview. So we break up that into, we put that in addition to the civics, because that's a big part, that's the bigger part actually of the interview. And then we have individualized tutoring and interview preparation, like I mentioned. But let's say we have a lot of people, for example, we have a student from Liberia. Well, they speak English in Liberia, so she speaks English, but she's never learned to read or write any language. So she came here, she can get by just fine, right? She has a job, she's doing great, but this test requires her to be able to read and write, and she has none of that. So we would pull her from class and have someone tutor her specifically on those skills to bring her reading and writing at least closer to her speaking. We did just have someone from Sudan with the same issue, but we had somebody working with her for over a year, tutoring her in reading and writing, and she just passed her test 2 weeks ago. So it's working. So we've had over 400 students enrolled, and I actually haven't counted this recently. We're probably closer to 500 in the last 3 years. And we have partnerships with the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art. We go there 3 times a quarter, and they use the civics-related art to teach those citizenship questions there. That's been a really cool partnership. Of course, as mentioned, with League of Women Voters. So Gloria and Gerald Hiller have done some voter education classes for our soon-to-graduate or folks who have graduated and become citizens, and we're probably due for another one of those. So we'll be talking. And then we just recently established a partnership with the World War I Museum, so we're really excited about that. Our first field trip there is this coming Friday, so that should be a really interesting lesson, I think. Over 150 of our graduates have become citizens in that time, and we used to have a 100% pass rate, but we had somebody who I told them, you are not ready yet, you need to keep studying, and they said, no, I'm ready, I will go, and they weren't ready. So that ruined my 100% pass rate. But we try not to send people who aren't ready because, one, it's expensive, but also it's a waste of their time, it's a waste of USCIS's time if they're not ready. We want to make sure everybody we send is confident and ready and can pass. And then between our program and our immigration clinic combined, we've helped over 600 people become citizens, at least, in the last 3 years. And then also a key component of our program is volunteers. We have volunteer tutors, and some of you in this room have actually come and volunteered with us. You'll see one of them in one of the slides. I think it was before. Did I miss it? Oh. Yeah. Oh, and Gloria's there too. Oh, yeah. You might even hear twice. I didn't even notice. But we've had over 80 volunteers serve 3,500 hours in the last 3 years, so it's been really incredible for us. Okay. So, the naturalization interview. There are some components here. English, obviously, is a big part of it because you have to be able to conduct an oral interview in English. So, you have to be able to make small talk. How's the weather outside? How did you get here today? What did you have for dinner last night? You need to be able to follow commands, stand up, sit down, follow me, things like that. And then there's the, I think, 20-something page application. You need to be able to answer questions about your application. So what did you put in that application? Because they're going to ask you about every single part of it. Maybe not every single one, but they're going to be very thorough, asking to confirm it's correct, make sure you didn't lie, make sure you didn't forget your sister's name or say it the wrong way, all those things. They also are going to ask questions about your character and your morals, your attachment to the Constitution, your willingness to take the oath of allegiance. And the reading section, you have to read at least one of the 3 given sentences correctly. So if you get the first one correct, cool, you move on, you pass that part. And then writing, you must be able to write one of the sentences given. Both reading and writing sentences are civics related, so we know the vocabulary. We don't know specifically which sentences they'll ask, but we drill on that vocabulary. And then civics, there are 100 possible civics questions, and they'll get a set of 10, and they have to get 6 correct. And we don't know which set of 10 they're going to get, so they do need to know all 100. And it's funny because actually most of our students that have passed come back and say, it was so easy. They stopped asking me questions after 6. I was like, well, that's good, you passed. They're like, I know all of the answers. I wanted all 10. I sort of like show them how much I know. It's kind of awesome. You know, I love that reaction when they come back. So, okay, so I need a volunteer to do a mock interview with me. Who wants to pretend to be a refugee? You can really just be yourself. You don't have to really be a refugee.
Paula or Sandra, one of our presidents, if
Yeah.
to do it.
Okay, come on up. How am I doing on time? No? Okay. If we go long, just let me know. Okay. So, we are going to start with, I got my clipboard. Yeah. Hi, I'm Tracy. How are you?
Thank you.
Good. What did you have for dinner last night? Lasagna. That sounds delicious.
It's not turned on.
I'm a refugee.
Okay, so I'm going to put her under oath, but then I'm going to ask her to lie, so that's not really fair. I just don't want her to feel like she has to give her real personal information, so even though I'm putting her under oath, just pretend like she's telling the truth. Okay, so please raise your right hand. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay. Can I see your green card or your passport?
Yes.
Why are you here today? This is probably the same blank stare that our students give them sometimes.
To be naturalized, I assume.
Yes. Why do you want to become an American citizen?
To have a country to call my own.
Also, I just want to point out a lot of our students, their answer is to vote, so you'll be happy to hear that. Okay. And this is the part I'm going to tell you you can totally lie if you don't want to tell all your correct information. So, what is your
Age?
Well, your birthday's on here. So. What is your current legal name?
Sandra Molina.
Have you used any other names since birth?
Yes.
Okay. What are your other names that you've used?
Sandra Sanchez.
When you become a citizen, would you like to change your names?
Yes.
Okay. What will be your new name?
Sandra Molina.
Okay. Where were you born? What country?
Mexico.
And when did you become a permanent resident?
Year?
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
1959.
Why did you wait so long to become a citizen? It's okay. You don't have to answer that.
I couldn't think that fast.
I'm going to skip a lot of the questions. I'm not going to do the full interview or it would take us an hour, but What is your current address?
5969 West 53rd Street.
Okay. How long have you lived at your current address?
29 years.
Okay. Now, if she had said 3 years or 1 year, I would have to ask her all of the addresses she's had in the last 5 years. So if you're like me, who for like a 10-year period moved at least once a year, you have a very long list and you're going to be there a while. And a lot of our students do have that because we resettle them into a house once they get jobs and get established. They move, sometimes buy a house or they rent somewhere else, and they move a lot. So we have a lot of people that's a hard task. And then they'll ask the same thing about employment. And have you traveled outside of the United States in the last 5 years?
Yes.
Okay, and then they would proceed to ask you all the places you went in the last 5 years, the dates of your travel, the reason of your travel, if you were out of the country more than 6 months, things like that. Okay, well, we won't go through that whole thing. How many times have you been married?
Once.
And what is your current marital status?
Not married.
So they would ask her to explain what that means. Is she a widow? Is she divorced? What is the circumstance? Do you have children?
Yes.
How many children do you have?
2.
What are the legal names and dates of birth of your children? You don't have to do all that because and they'll ask where your children were born and what their relationship to you is. Are they biological, adopted, stepchild, etc.? Okay, now we're getting into the good stuff. Have you ever claimed to be a U.S. citizen?
No.
Do you owe any federal, state, or local taxes?
No.
Have you ever not filed a federal, state, or local tax return since you became a permanent resident? Imagine if English was your first language. Like, right? That's a tough question.
Have you ever not?
Not filed a federal, state, or local tax return.
No.
Okay. Have you ever been a member of or in any way associated with the Communist Party?
That includes the League of Women Voters.
I think that depends on who you ask.
According to our Secretary of State. No.
Good answer. Were you ever involved in any way with genocide?
No.
Were you ever involved in any way with badly hurting or trying to hurt a person on purpose?
No.
Were you ever a member of, or did you ever serve in a military unit, self-defense unit, or guerrilla group?
No.
Were you ever a worker, volunteer, or soldier, or did you ever serve in a prison, jail, or labor camp?
No.
Did you ever sell, give, or provide weapons to any person, or help another person sell weapons?
No.
Did you ever use any person under age 15 to do anything that helped or supported people in combat?
No.
Have you ever been charged with committing, attempting to commit, or assisting in committing a crime or offense?
Does that include teenage children? No.
So if they say yes on this, they would have to explain. Any of these, if they say yes, that should be no, or no, that should be yes, they have to be able to explain the circumstances. Have you ever received a suspended sentence, been placed on probation, or been paroled?
No.
Have you ever been a prostitute or procured an prostitution? That, by the way, is a very embarrassing thing to explain to 80-year-old refugee women, because why would they know what that word means? So then I have to explain what a prostitute is. They get very uncomfortable, as do I. A lot of them are mortified that I would ask, like, why would you think? They're going to ask you that. You need to know. Have you ever married someone in order to obtain an immigration benefit?
No.
Have you ever failed to support your dependents or to pay alimony?
No.
Have you ever lied to any U.S. government official to gain entry or admission into the United States or to gain immigration benefits while in the United States?
No.
Have you ever been placed in removal, exclusion, rescission, or deportation proceedings?
No.
Are you currently a member of the U.S. Armed Forces?
No.
Past that part. Okay. Do you support the Constitution and form of government of the United States?
I do.
Do you understand the full oath of allegiance to the United States?
I do.
Are you willing to take the full oath of allegiance to the United States?
I will.
If the law requires it, are you willing to bear arms on behalf of the United States?
Yes.
If the law requires it, are you willing to perform non-combatant services in the U.S. Armed Forces?
Yes.
If the law requires it, are you willing to perform work of national importance under civilian direction?
Yes.
Okay. So those, if they say no to any of those, we have had some students who, for example, are Buddhist, so they can't swear that they will bear arms. That's okay, but they have to write like an essay sort of that goes with their application, and they have to be able to explain it in the interview. So it is possible to say no to that, but you have to explain it. Okay, 100 questions. Are you ready?
Sure.
What are two rights in the Declaration of Independence? Maybe I should keep track on this one. 4, just to be safe. Is that a pen? I have
This is giving you extra time to think.
I know, amendments.
I hear some cheaters in the audience. Two rights in the Declaration of Independence.
We the people. No.
No? That's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There's a 3 you can say.
Oh, I knew that.
The House of Representatives has how many voting members?
I'm guessing here. 535?
How many off was she? 100 off. It's 435.
Okay.
Pressure's going. Pressure's on. If the president can no longer serve, who becomes president?
It doesn't happen.
By the way, if she was in a real interview, she should not say that. What are...
But even with my First Amendment right?
They don't care about that at USCIS, apparently. What are 2 cabinet-level positions?
Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasurer.
Good. Who is the commander-in-chief of the military?
You want the nickname?
Maybe that's just the title.
The president.
When must all men register for the selective service?
At the age of 18.
There were 13 original states. Name 3. Makes good faces.
Virginia. Maryland.
She's calling a friend here. Okay, you need one more.
Pennsylvania.
Correct. There's a really easy cheat to this. There are 3 that start with new, and it's not New Mexico. So that's the way we try to teach the students. It's easier to remember New York, New Jersey, New Hampshire. Although some of them have lived in some of these states, so some of them remember other ones easily. What did Martin Luther King Jr. do? Summary, you don't have to tell me everything.
Well, I'm thinking he led the civil rights movement.
Where is the Statue of Liberty?
Ellis Island in New York.
It's actually wrong island. So technically, I don't know what they would say on that. I don't know, since she said Ellis Island first, but it's really Liberty Island. I don't know if they would accept that answer. Because if you say the wrong answer first, and then you say the correct answer after that, because New York is correct, but Ellis Island is correct. So they may count that one wrong. So I'm going to count it wrong. So now she has, well, she's already passed, so it's okay. But we're going to ask you the last one anyway. Who does a U.S. Senator represent?
Its constituents from the state they represent.
So she passed. She passed. I'm not going to do the reading and writing part because I'm going to assume she can read and write these sentences. But some sample sentences for reading. Who was Abraham Lincoln? Where does the president live? When is Memorial Day? And there's any combination. They don't have to answer those questions. They just have to be able to read them. And then the writing, there's several possible ones. I'll just give you the first one. The flag is red, white, and blue. Mexico is south of the United States. Washington is the father of our country, etc. So those are some samples. They're dictated to them, and then they would be handed a paper, and they write the sentence on there. And thank you very much. Let's give her a quick round. Too fast. So I think welcome to our country. She got this side. She got this side of Uncle Sam, not this one. I've had to go this one. Okay. We'll go to the next thing. So I think if you've ever been to, I'm assuming most of you have been to a naturalization ceremony at some point. So you've heard the Oath of Allegiance, and you probably can't see all that, and I'm not going to read it all to you. It's very long. But I encourage you, if you've never heard or seen the Oath of Allegiance, to look it up. It's really interesting what we're asking people to promise, and I don't think all Americans necessarily would promise everything in here. So, okay, so I think I covered everything. I don't know if there's any questions maybe for all of us, but if you are ever interested in volunteering, Gloria can talk to you about how volunteering is in our program. And you cannot read that probably because it's quite small. So I can pass along the contact information if you are interested in signing up to be a volunteer. We'll start a new quarter April 9th, and we're adding a night class at the Argentine branch of the library. So we're looking for new volunteers that can volunteer in the evening as well. So if you're interested, let us know.
Okay, I think we have a few minutes for a couple questions. Does anyone have any questions from the crowd here? Yeah, my question's a little bit off, but it's something I've really been wondering about. A few years back, there was a young Slovenian refugee who came to this country by the name of Melania Naus. She received what was called a genius visa. Now later she married her boyfriend, as we know. Now the media is beginning to question why she got it, how she got it, and whether or not she was qualified for it. And frankly, I've never heard a satisfactory explanation of what a genius visa would be or what you have to do to get one. And so I'd like you to address that, please.
I should look her up and try and figure out how in the world she got a genius visa. There is no such thing as a genius visa, but there are extraordinary ability visas in the employment categories. There are people who can basically self-sponsor if they prove that they are the cream of the crop. And if you're not the cream of the crop, you can qualify for an employment-based visa if you have a national interest waiver. So if you're going to do something really good, and usually you have to have a department of the government support your application. And then there are extraordinary researchers and professors. So I'm guessing she's not one of those. So those are the top category for employment. So I'm guessing that she was extraordinary. A model. That could be it. Extraordinarily well connected. People also get legal in the United States by buying their green cards. I don't know if you have $1 million, you can purchase your green card for yourself if you invest in the United States and employ 10 U.S. workers for a period of 2 years. And so that's another category that we didn't talk about. I'll look up Felicia and try and figure out what she did. And there's another question there. Go ahead.
I would like to know what the story is on dual citizenship.
Well, that's a good one. Dual citizenship. The United States kind of had a policy that we do not have dual citizenship, but if the other country recognizes it, then we'll go along with it. So when you get citizenship in the United States, you got to say that you're giving up your allegiance to all other countries, and you got to take that oath and say that in court. But if your country recognizes dual citizenship, usually to get rid of your citizenship in your home country, you have to sign or do something affirmative to give it up. So you can carry 2 passports. You maintain your citizenship in both countries. And, you know, we're seeing 3 and 4 countries now. People that have immigrated, it's kind of fun. I wish I could do that. Anything else?
Could you explain the difference? Could you explain the difference between refugees and asylum seekers?
Well, that's an easy one.
So refugees are individuals who are fleeing persecution and they apply for their refugee status outside the United States. Asylees are individuals who come to the United States and then declare their desire to have permanent legal status in the United States as a result of their persecution.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Same thing.
Inside, outside.
Where you are when you make that declaration.
Do they both get equal assistance from the government?
They do not. Refugees get assistance from the government in terms of resettlement support from agencies like JVS and Catholic Charities. They get between 3 to 6 months of financial support, and they are immediately eligible to work. Asylees are not immediately eligible to work, and they get no formal support.
They get the boot. They get the boot. They get the boot. They get put right into deportation, usually. That's what happens to people who come here for asylum. They may get detained at the airport and put in jail, or at the border, or they get put straight into deportation proceedings. There are very few people that come and apply affirmatively without being caught. It's usually as a defensive thing. But our asylum system is extremely backlogged and a mess right now.
There was a movie, A Good Lie, and actually it involved Kansas City with like refugees coming from South Sudan. And I had 2 questions on it. Was the movie, did you feel like what was good or bad about the movie? And then the other question was, I was kind of surprised because at the very end of the movie they were talking about one of the young men had been in a soldier and all that and everything. And then I noticed one of the questions a lot of questions were you a soldier, did you help, and all that. So I was wondering, how did this person get in?
Yeah, so, so it's okay, some of those questions it's okay to say yes to. Like I said, if you have an explanation. So if you were in the armed forces of your country, that's not necessarily looked upon like negatively, but it just depends on what probably the relationship with that country is with the U.S. It's going to depend on if you were in a militia that was trying to overthrow the government. There's so many different levels to that, and there are a lot of questions about military that are more specific. I just only used a couple. As far as the movie, it's been a long time since I saw it. The one thing I remember is like they kind of just get dropped off and don't get any kind of cultural orientation or any assistance, it seems like. They just sort of dropped them off in an apartment and left them, and I don't know about exactly how JBS does it, but I'm pretty sure that legitimate refugee resettlement agencies aren't going to do that. We have, the first 90 days that they're in country, they're in our building almost every single day. They're taking cultural orientation classes, English classes, job training classes. We're getting them to doctor's appointments and enrolling their kids in school, and we've set up their home with furniture and taught them how to use everything in the apartment, things like that. So the movie, that may happen. I think that does happen with some places, but legitimate resettlement agencies aren't going to just drop them off and leave them to fend for themselves. We get, our funding for those first 90 days is per capita. So the number of people we resettle, we get that money to then help them do that, right? So that part I remember being like, whoa, that's not how we do this. That's making us all look bad. But I don't know if you had anything else about that movie. Yeah. Did that answer the question?
Back in January, I saw a couple of advertisements for citizenship preparation classes at the public libraries in Kansas City, Missouri. And then I became curious, what's offered or available in Johnson County? I'm aware of Immigrant Connection at the Olathe Wesleyan Church. What else?
Yeah, that's actually the only one I know about. Also, our program is the only one
that with the Catholic Charities
at least federally funded in the whole metro.
That with other locations that Catholic Charities has here in Johnson County, it's difficult to offer classes in Olathe or on West 87th Street.
Yeah, well, for one, we're resettling almost every refugee we resettle is in Wyandotte County for the most part. They may eventually move to Johnson County. We have several students that come from Johnson County to our classes. The short answer is we don't have enough manpower because under our grant we have to have a staff teacher be the lead teacher. So even though we can have as many volunteers helping in classes as we want, we're not supposed to be having volunteers be the lead teachers. So I can't be everywhere. And I do have one other teacher that teaches under the grant, and then one who teaches the older folks. But there's only so many hours in the week, fortunately. I would love to expand more, but we just don't have the funding doesn't go that far.
I think we've got time for one more question.
How much did you say the cost of an application for naturalization is?
$725.
Okay, I thought you said 700 something. If they don't have the money, and I've been going to this organization meetings, and they love me, and they've collected $725. Is that a way, or do we have to go? Should we go through Catholic Charities? Can we give you money to help toward that fee? That's the big question. Would we give it to you for somebody that we didn't know?
Yeah, if there's not somebody you know that you wanted to sponsor for something like that, we would gladly accept a donation like that. So for us, we've actually talked about how can we do this, because that's a way for people to feel connected to this purpose.
Okay, so we can specify what our money was.
Right, so our problem is, right now we have 80 students in class, right? I would say about half of them qualify for a fee waiver, so fortunately they won't have to pay that amount. But the other half, how do we decide which one person gets that money? So we kind of struggled with how do we go about doing that without showing favoritism? But if we had enough to sponsor, let's say 5 people, maybe we make that a motivation for, at the beginning of the quarter, we say we have 5 scholarships for people who need it, and these are, I'm happy to come up with those. We just have never had somebody specifically say, hey, I want to give you $725. I'm happy to talk to you about that.
I wouldn't have 725, but somebody could help me do that. One scenario, if the interviewee had said she'd been married 3 times, and then you ask, did you ever marry anyone
to obtain an immigration benefit?
And because she's under oath, she said yes. Then
they would probably have a lot of follow-up questions, and then her file would probably be like the student I talked about that took her over a year to go from interview. Yeah, she had her interview. It took her a year from application to interview, and then another year from interview to oath, because after her interview, she had been married, I think, twice, and there was some question about whether or not she married for her green card. And it took them a year to investigate her marriages.
Okay, that's what I wondered.
So
was
she's probably going to have
right
more
then
legal.
Let me jump in there
Yeah.
and just say that immigration looks at the citizenship process as the last chance to catch someone. Okay? And so going into citizenship interview with questionable facts or a problem like that, that's where they catch. The fake marriages, they are investigating. They've got fraud officers in every office now, and they sit at home and check everyone's backgrounds on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and everything else under the sun. And that person, we treat a fake marriage the same as someone who has committed murder or sold a kilo of cocaine. It's a permanent bar from the United States. So when that person gets caught, they'll be put into deportation. It'll take a long time, but they will be deported. So, and there is no waiver, no forgiveness, period. And it's the same thing, that question that she asked about, have you ever claimed to be a United States citizen? If that person tells the truth and says yes, at one time when they got a job, when they were undocumented, and they marked down that they're a citizen, that is the kiss of death. Okay? If it happened after 1996, it's a deportable offense. So those interviews are serious, and people need to be prepared, and sometimes people should not apply for citizenship because that's the way they get caught. So, anyway, you guys, if you want to get inspired, go out to Johnson County Community College, the Polsky Auditorium? Yardley. The 5th, March the 5th at 8:30.
March the 14th.
March 14th.
14th.
Ceremonies at 10:30, but be apprised if there you would be interested to go, and it's open to the public.
Open to the public. But there will be 400 petitioners with all of their family and friends. So last year there were 1,340 some people in Yardley Auditorium and 100 in the spillover room. So if you want to go and you want to see the ceremony, go early, because they have to be there by around 8:30, and they start arriving at 7:30. The beauty of it is the college is not in session, so there is parking, but it's still going to be a fun job to find a space, because they take this seriously and they have a lot of space. They think there's an understanding that there's a lot of space, so they bring lots of friends and family who want to see this special occasion. So it's a busy place. And then we have all the volunteers for League of Women Voters and Social Security and Passport, as well as security and other college officials. So it's a busy place that morning, but it is an opportunity for you to see that ceremony if you want to.
And at least 12 of our students are going to be naturalizing on that day, so we'll be there too.
Okay, I want to thank our speakers for this fantastic program this morning. And we usually thank our speakers with the most sought after League special pen. Apparently, it also lights up. So thank you.
Thank you.